G'day, I'm Sean and welcome back to the CarExpert Podcast. It's our favourite time of the month, it's VFACTS time. And to help me get through all of the numbers, because there are a lot, James Wong, how you doing, mate?
I'm good, I feel good in centre stage.
Yes, we've moved you across one and taking your traditional place. Jack Quick, how are you, mate?
Hello, I'm very good, thank you.
You guys ready to get into all the numbers?
Yeah, I think so. It's been a pretty big month.
It is our sole focus. What we've decided to do, traditionally with VFACTS episodes, we just do it as a component, but what we've decided to do from now on, because they only come around once a month, is actually spend a bit more time diving into all the detailed numbers. And if you guys like that, leave a comment, let us know. If you think it's too much or too data heavy, leave a comment, let us know, because we do everything based on your feedback. But let's just get straight into it. There's no real way to sugarcoat this. Numbers are down. They only delivered 99,881 cars in September. Oh dear.
So it only took 10 months for your predictions to be right, so that's good.
Eventually we got there. Down 9.7% year on year, but it is continuing an overall downward trend for year to date as well. We're 927,000 deliveries year to date. So it's not like the new car market is struggling per se, but I guess let's just jump into the top five. So Toyota, obviously number one.
No surprise.
No surprise at all. But the big surprise is it's a 13.4% drop year on year. So where's this drop come from? Because it's down big from last month.
Yeah, I think Toyota's been down in certain areas because some of their key models are not on sale. So the Prado is a prime example. That often is doing between 1,500 and 2,500 units a month, and between generations, where we've been waiting, 6 months now for the new one to come on to market, and we still don't know when it's actually coming. So I think that's left a big hole in their lineup.
I think another one is definitely Camry. As we've talked about on the podcast, the new one has only just started arriving in Australia, and for 12, 18 months, you haven't been able to buy a hybrid one. So for the rest of the year, I forecast that'll start to ramp up.
Okay, well look, don't shed too many tears for the folks at Toyota. They're still doing okay with 18,000 deliveries. Ford, on the other hand, second place, 8,303, up 3.6% year on year. I don't really understand where that's come from, because everyone, Mazda in third is up 2.1%, Kia in fourth up 4.8%, and Mitsubishi up 6.4% in fifth. There's not really any new models from any of those guys.
I think I can talk on that. Given Prado, one of Ford's next biggest models is definitely the Everest, and I think Ford is really capitalizing on the Prado not being available. Get into an Everest instead, you can get it sooner than a Prado, a new gen at least.
Look, obviously we don't know what the new Prado is like, because none of us have driven it, and I don't think anyone's really driven it, but based on the previous gen Prado, the Everest is a much better overall package, right? So
100%, yeah, the Everest was always a really technologically advanced body on frame 4x4, the same way that the Ranger is compared to the Ute competitors. I think the Prado was selling on its branding and its penchant for reliability, and the fact that Toyota had great dealer coverage, and those kind of buyers who go into the rough stuff often were really buying into that. The new one will be interesting. I still think the new one looks really good. International press has been very complimentary. From what we know of the Lexus GX, there's a really capable platform underneath. I'm very interested to see how this development of the 2.8 litre diesel goes, because it's not any more powerful. The mild hybrid assistance is very mild.
Well, based on Hilux, it doesn't really do a whole lot.
No, but the 8-speed transmission, I think, might be a really big development for that car. And it'll be interesting to see whether we get additional drivetrains in the future, like that the turbocharged petrol that they offer in the Lexus RX and stuff. So there's still some room to move there, but yeah, it'll be really interesting once the Prado eventually comes. Toyota, tell us when we're bringing it, because we've been waiting for a while.
Yeah, can we please drive one? We know basically everything about it except for how it actually drives on the road. But you mentioned GX. We have the video review live on the YouTube page. It was fantastic, and honestly, I know it's more expensive than the Prado will be, but having spent a weekend driving that, I think you would be mad to buy a Prado over that, unless you're buying sort of the lower level Prado. If you're looking at Kakadu, which a lot of people do buy, I think you'd be better just spend the extra couple of bucks and get the Lexus with that V6. But
hot tip.
Yeah, that's just my thought. Okay, let's look at the models. RAV4, unsurprisingly, still number one. Now there's a steady stream of supply with that car. It is absolute perennial favourite. But Ranger and Hilux, they're still duking it out in second and third. Hilux just doesn't seem to have it anymore, does it? What, the mojo's gone? What's happening there?
I think Hilux is just, it's starting to show its age now, and there's a lot of really capable competitors on the market. The Ranger has really started to find its legs and extend its lead. I think Ford's getting better with supply. They've released a number of new additions to the range as well. And there's just been more choice. There's more Chinese stuff coming in. You've got various other cars that are on the way. People might be holding out for a BYD Shark, which is launching soon. There's quite a number of different options there. And as we know, there's a new ute every 2 weeks, isn't it? So I think the Hilux, like the old Prado, sells a lot on branding, reliability, all that kind of stuff. But in terms of objectively how good that car is in an everyday usability sense compared to rivals, there's just so much choice out there that people are probably just shopping around.
That's a very good point. Fourth place, Everest, as you mentioned, with no Prado. They're up to 2,900 deliveries for September.
That's a lot. I think that's a record.
Yeah, that's a ripper month for Ford dealers there. And then D-Max in fifth, 2,612 deliveries. I mean, good on D-Max. And there's not a new D-Max, but a new D-Max variant that's going to be here any second now with the Blade, as spied by CarExpert. We don't know when that's actually going to be here yet, do we?
Not yet. I assume before the end of the year. I just want to add something on D-Max. I wrote a story over the last week about the 10 cheapest utes, and I think it comes into why the D-Max has been selling so well. I was looking at the 10 cheapest utes, and the base model D-Max is currently the cheapest ute you can buy in Australia.
Really?
I thought it was the base Hilux, and it technically is from like an RRP standpoint. But if you look at it from a drive-away pricing, Isuzu has a really sharp deal for the base model, single cab chassis, 4x2 manual with a smaller 1.9 litre engine, and it just undercuts the Hilux. So I reckon that is why D-Max has been selling so well.
There you go, yeah. I mean, fleets are always looking to save a buck where they can. That's a top tip as well if you're looking to buy a new ute. When the Jack T9 gets here, though, that may well... Yeah. When new T9 gets here...
JAC?
JAC.
I never know
Jack.
what to say.
When that gets here, though, that's going to provide some stiff competition for those sort of lower-end utes, though, isn't it?
I think they're launching with dual cab pickups though. So I think their lower end one is still around the 40 grand drive away mark, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right, 41.
Okay. Yeah, so it's going for like a lower end of like the private lifestyle ute segment. I think in terms of the heavy duty stuff, the main Chinese entrant in there is the base GWM. What do they call it now? The Canon Ute, not the Ute Canon.
Update that's
they've
coming.
changed the naming, and that's getting some upgrades next year with a new diesel engine and an upgraded towing capacity, which should make it a lot more competitive with some of the the mainstream ute options in market. So like we said, there's a new bloody ute every 5 minutes.
Yeah, yes, and plenty more to come. All right, let's dive into some of the segments here, because this is something that we've not traditionally done on the CarExpert podcast, but I think there's some really interesting numbers. So I want to start off with the light cars under $30,000. Now, if you're wondering where these sort of segment divides come from, this is how the FCAI actually breaks up all of the numbers to make sense. It's not necessarily how people buy cars or shop for cars, but in terms of just making sense of the numbers, it's probably the easiest way to do it. So light cars under 30 grand. MG3, 958 deliveries in the month. Now, what I'm curious about is how many of those are the new MG3 and how many of those are the old one, which is currently in run out, and there's a ton of them around.
I'd be interested to know too, because we don't get access to that data, so we can't really provide a breakdown on that using these figures. We need to reach out to manufacturers they have a deeper set of analytical metrics that they can use, and a lot of the time they're not actually willing to share that, because I think there's various things in place there. What I have noticed though is that MG3 has actually started to fall, because we used to see it like doing consistently between 1,200 and 1,500. I don't actually see a lot of the new ones on the road at all.
I can count on two hands the times I've seen them on the road. I would say with this number, I would be surprised a lot of them are the pre-update models still, because it has a really sharp price.
It's under 20 grand on the road, isn't it? So.
And there are still heaps of them in stock, at least until the end of the year. So I feel, at least for now, that's what's bumping up the sales figures.
Okay, have you bought an MG3? Let us know, did you buy the old one or the new one? Leave a comment. Okay, so small cars under 40 grand. I find this one really interesting because, let's be honest, the Toyota Corolla has been the world's most popular car for 4 decades or something like that. But it's been outsold by the Kia Cerato. Now, I'm curious. Obviously, the Corolla is not a $15,000 car anymore. It's now a $40,000 odd car. Is this because there's only a hybrid lineup? More people are going for that sort of punchy little 2-litre petrol in the Cerato, or where do you think the sort of move to Kia is coming from?
My forecast on this is Kia has taken a big stockpile of the current Cerato, because soon enough they're going to be moving to a new model called the K4, and I feel they're trying to stockpile as much as they can before the end of the year or the new year, when that K4 arrives with the crazy styling that we've seen. And I wouldn't be surprised if that is why it's bumped up. And part of that is also just the more affordable price point for the Cerato 2 over the hybrid Corollas.
Yeah, okay. So you think there might be a lot of Kia Cerato dealer demos getting around at the moment?
I wouldn't be surprised.
And I think just their normal drive-away pricing, you can get into an entry-level Cerato S for a good couple of grand under 30, whereas a base Corolla hybrid, I think, is 31 or 32 plus on-road costs. So you're looking at 35, 36. It's almost a 10 grand difference. And I know that we've sort of discussed cost of living pressures of the Australian market lately. And I feel like it's amplified that a lot of people are still like spending big and getting the expensive stuff, but we're also seeing that people are getting really price conscious at the entry level. So we're seeing some of these, more affordable, sharply priced cars getting a bit of time in the sun now that people are being made a little bit more economical with their choices.
Do you also think maybe with Kia, it's the overall package is better than what Toyota are offering? You've got 7-year unlimited kilometre warranty. You've got fairly well priced cap price servicing. It's a bigger car overall with more storage space. Do you think that's just a better offering for budget conscious consumers?
I think it's definitely something that comes into consideration, and before you start reading into all the fine print, Toyota has some benefits in there, like an extended driveline warranty and battery warranty provided you service within their network, and their per year servicing is probably cheaper than Kia's is. But I think a lot of people are probably drawn to the buy-in price, and when you're saving anywhere between $5,000 and $10,000 up front, the servicing costs probably are more of like a forward-looking sort of thing that you don't really consider until that first interval when you come back into the service shop.
And then you get a rude shock when you're wondering why your service is so expensive. Yes. Okay. We would be remiss if we didn't talk SUVs, because they are still quite clearly the favourite thing in Australia. RAV4 still number one, but if we look at the medium SUV under 60 grand, which is where RAV4 falls and all the most popular Australian SUVs are, it's more than double the deliveries of its closest rival, the Mitsubishi Outlander. I mean, what is it about RAV4 that Outlander doesn't have, that Sportage doesn't have? I mean, what is it that Toyota's doing there?
I would love to know. Because I've driven a number of RAV4s now, and I can see in the past it was like a default choice, but there are so many options out there. I think it just speaks volume to how Toyota has really turned on the tap for RAV4 supply. People can just get into them really quickly now, unlike previously, and that's why there's such a big lead. I think also part of that is there's a huge wait list. Perhaps it's not as large as it was anymore, but they're probably still fulfilling those orders as well, and inflating the overall sales figure for that car.
Fair enough. I mean, look, Outlander is a good package, Sportage is a good package, but they're doing less than half the numbers of RAV.
I think the hybrid element is a big part of that too, because the RAV4 offers a full range of hybrid models, and now it's actually hybrid only. And so, a lot of people that I've spoken to who are in the market, whether they're family, friends, or just random people, when they're looking at these kind of segments, hybrid is a really big consideration factor for them. And the fact that Toyota not only has a full range of hybrids, but they've got a reputation for hybrid and reliability, people just automatically think of RAV4. And so I think that's where the other brands have a challenge, because the Outlander plug-in hybrid, for example, is much more expensive than the standard Outlander. The Sportage hybrid is only available in very select grades, very limited supply. The Tucson has just brought out a full range of hybrids, and I think people are just starting to get on the train with that one, because we're starting to see that they're doing well with that, but there's still a higher price point there. And then, if it's not that, it's perhaps the GWM Haval H6 hybrid, which is also very popular. But clearly, it's the fact that GWM has quite a readily available supply of H6 hybrids, and it's not even in the top 5, just shows you how much weight that these legacy brands have in these key segments. Because, I think that's still a really important consideration for people in this part of the market where they want something that's going to be long-term, safe, reliable, all that kind of thing. Whether it's objectively provable or not is another thing, but it just shows how strong Toyota's branding is.
Absolutely. They are not slowing down. All right, Utes. Got to talk about Utes. Yes. So look, Hilux. When we talk the Ute numbers with like Ranger and Hilux, it is a combination of the 4x2 and 4x4s. However, when it comes to 4x2 models, Hilux vastly outsells Ranger. So Hilux clearly still have the fleet market because I can't imagine many private buyers are buying 4x2 Hilux.
I would not be buying a Workmate. I'm sorry. I've driven that and I nearly ruined my neck.
Yeah, fair enough.
On the ride.
I just want to flag something on that. D-Max is right behind the Hilux now. Just on the last month's figures, it was closer than you would think. So I wouldn't be surprised if D-Max potentially overtakes in the next little bit.
Right,
Because
okay.
Especially with a sharp drive-away price at the
What was
entry
it, like
level.
32,990 drive away or something like that?
32,490 for
So
the
cheap.
base.
Yeah, okay, well, that's something to keep an eye out on. But the big one, I guess, Ranger. So Ranger did 289 4x2s. That means the rest of the 4,485 deliveries were 4x4s. Now, people online, they love to get teary about, who has that much money to spend on a car? Clearly, lots of people do. I mean, what are we selling? Are they selling a lot of top-end stuff? You think they're selling more mid-range stuff? Where do you think that lies?
Well, I went past a Ford dealer over the weekend and I saw like 5 or 6 Raptors just chilling on the lot. So they've got supply at the ready. So that's like right at the high end. I was looking the other day when I was writing that Ute story, and the Raptor's now like 90 grand before on roads. So it's basically like a 100 grand car, which baffles my mind. But obviously it's a top seller and it's what people want.
We could ask Paul why.
Or that too.
So I guess the big thing is that appetite doesn't seem to be going away. Do we think with the rumoured changes to instant asset write-off, do we think Ute sales are going to actually increase coming into the new year, or do we think that they'll probably just sort of plateau a little bit?
I don't know. It's such an interesting conversation, and talking to the thing about people complaining about the price of things. Like, this is the thing that always really confuses me about our commenters and what people are actually buying, right? Because the average transaction price of new vehicles, I'm pretty sure this is like verifiable by a study, it's around the $60,000 point. Now that is a lot of money, and we've all been complaining about the lack of more affordable options. We see it in the comments, we hear you and all that kind of stuff, but you aren't going out and buying these cars. And that's why manufacturers are not bringing these cars in, because everyone goes straight to the top of the line. So even if you're starting at a 30 grand, look at the D-Max for example, starts at 30 grand, but people are buying the X-Terrains just as much if not more, and that's a $70,000 Ute. Hilux has a really high ratio of not just the base Workmates, but also the SR5s and all of their, special high-grade models. The Ranger, even more so, has always been the private buyer's Ute of choice because it is almost like an SUV that can tow and do all those things. So clearly, when people are actually getting in market, they feel like splurging and treating themselves to something a little bit nicer. That's fair enough. But I think in terms of what we've got coming up, the instant asset write-off changes, we've got changes to our emission standards, which really will shake up what we see from the Ute segment, I think, because a lot of our Utes in Australia are still old Euro 5 models. They're very high emitting, very high consuming. And so, if changes come in and then, payload and towing changes are a part of that, which is something that we've seen from other segments across the market, it'll be a really interesting thing to see. And Ford has so much riding on the Ranger and the Everest in terms of sales volume. That will be the first company, I think, to feel those changes the most, because it's like 80% of their volume is the T6 cars. So it's a lot. So
that's an interesting thing. Before we move on to electric vehicles, we'll talk about the emissions regs that are coming in. Toyota can probably afford to get away with selling some dirty Hiluxes because they sell so many other hybrids, and let's be honest, they could probably just cop the fines that come their way. But they do have the extremely mild Hiluxes to offset that a bit. Ford, on the other hand, don't have any hybridization in their Ranger or Everest lineup, but they are introducing AdBlue into the 4-cylinder models. Is that going to be enough to get them out of trouble with these emission standards, or are they going to have to do something drastic coming into the new year?
Well, I think that new plug-in hybrid will play a big part of that, and that's why they've perhaps confirmed, I think they had XLT, Wild Track, and another version that or maybe even the Sport, I can't remember.
Sport, and then there was that special limited edition
Stormbreaker
one.
or whatever it's called.
Storm Track.
Storm Track, yeah. So they've got 4 distinct variants coming in. The Storm Tracker is going to be a limited edition model, at least at launch, but that might change. And so I think depending on what Ford can do in terms of the premium for the PHEV will determine how popular it is. And I think, the dealers will be pushing for that so that they can meet these, there'll probably be incentives in place to try and meet that, especially between January and April when that FBT exemption is about to end, which we'll talk about PHEVs in a moment. But yeah, I think for Ford, they've at least got a much lower emitting version that, at least by official metrics, might get down to like 2 or 3 litres per 100 Ks, and the CO2 level will be really low. But then they're going to have to really go hard on EVs as well, because otherwise they don't really have anything else in the lineup to offset that.
Okay, so with Ranger PHEV on its way and Shark coming, now I understand on paper Shark seems like it's got all the power in the world and all that sort of stuff, but in reality, when it comes to towing a trailer up a hill, when they run out of electricity in that battery, that little 1.5 litre engine, that Shark, is not going to cut the mustard. Whereas the Ranger probably stands a much better chance of still being able to act as a car. Do you think that Shark is going to come in and probably do a ripper job out the gate, or do you think people are going to be really hesitant with these plug-in hybrid utes?
That's a good question. I don't know. I think it all comes down to whether this is being marketed as a fleet ute or whether it's a private ute. Because for private buyers, I feel like they want the EV range and they perhaps won't be towing as often and they mightn't mind. But for fleet buyers, which is what I kind of see, the Ranger in particular, and in part the Shark, once you run out, exactly as you spoke about, Sean, once you run out of battery power, that engine's going to be working hard. It's kind of the whole point of having this ute to power the work site and drive an electric power, not be blasting diesel, but I know that this is petrol with the PHEVs. But yeah, I'm interested to see whether it really shakes it up at all.
Yeah, it could be, we don't know. It could be a non-starter. We can't even get our hands on a press car at the moment. There's just no opportunity in sight for that. But I believe that there is someone going on a launch for it soon.
Perhaps. Yeah, this week. So I'm very, very excited for that. And I will share my thoughts when I can.
Yes, we'll see what the embargo is. And hopefully you can get us a press car soon, James, because we actually really want to drive that thing.
We can hope.
Yes, we can hope. All right, let's talk EVs. So EV numbers. Now, Will did a fantastic write-up which broke down all of the numbers of EVs year to date on the website. I will put a link in the description and the show notes. But 70,000 deliveries of ZL EVs, that's zero and low emission vehicles to date, 30,750 of which were Teslas. I mean, we sit here every month and say, Tesla's numbers are down. They're not exactly toughing it out there, are they? They're still doing plenty of volume.
It's kind of like Toyota in the sense that they're really dominating that EV market at this stage.
So I guess the big thing is normally, or traditionally, and we spoke about this previously on the podcast, that back end of a quarter, Tesla will load up all their numbers and they'll register a bunch of cars and say, look, we've done heaps. They haven't done that this month. The numbers are down for Tesla.
Yeah, and it seems like there's been very consistent volume in terms of what their monthly figures are for the entire year. I think we've seen a slow decline, particularly in Model Y, because I think people might be waiting for this new, Juniper update or Jupiter, whatever they call it. And Model 3, I think, has had really stiff competition from the BYD seal. So there's been, I think it's still doing around, anywhere between 700 and 1,200 units per month. And it's still good that we get these figures because after all that EV sales growth in the last couple of years off the back of Tesla's success, once they stopped reporting to VFACTS, it was going to start really skewing the numbers. So it's been interesting to see, but at the same time, we've got heaps of new options coming into the market over the next 6 months or so and beyond actually. And so, while Tesla was sort of, the trailblazer and the benchmark for a really long time, I think in Australia at least, while in other parts of the world there's been a lot more competition, I think we're going to start seeing the market open up, and with less supply constraints and all that kind of thing, I think we'll see it level out a little bit, and it'll be really cool to see what Australians start taking to once they're, a lot of people have had Model Ys for a long time now. Paul is a good example where he's had one for a long time and then it gets to the point where you want to sell it off, but Tesla's still selling you pretty much the same car that you bought, 4 to 5 years ago, or how long has it been on market now? Yeah. So, and the new Model 3 is a big improvement in a lot of ways, but it's still fundamentally the same car. So I imagine that once more options come up where there are existing Tesla buyers looking to try something different, I think that'll be where we see some really interesting trends.
Now, Jack, you took these Tesla numbers as your specialist subject this week, and you've dived into it a little bit more. So I guess the big thing is, the overall numbers are the monthly numbers are down, but the overall numbers, I guess, are up year on year. So Tesla are not really seeing a sales slowdown as such, are they?
No. Something I will note just before I get into my little spiel here is Tesla no longer reports its sales data to the FCAI, the Federal Chamber of Automotive Industries. That's the acronym, isn't it? So that's where we get all the VFACTS sales data from. Instead, it now reports its data to the EV Council, which is a separate entity. Polestar also does the same, now reports through EV Council. It just makes it a little bit more complicated, but I've got all my figures here.
All right, so let's dive into it. Let's have a look.
Yes. So as we've spoken about, in particular, September was a pretty hard month for EVs. Tesla sales in particular really did slump. So Model Y in particular had 1,498 examples, whereas Model 3 was 1,151. Despite that, the Model Y was still the 13th top selling car for the month, and the Model 3 was the 20th top selling car for the month. So it's still up there. It's just the headlines are saying that the sales are slumping, which in reality they are, but they're still very high volume. They're just not as high as they once were this time last year. But overall for EVs, as we've already discussed, it's actually trending upwards compared to this time last year. So as you talked about, Sean, there was just over 70,000 EVs sold year to date, up until the end of September. And the top two EVs, no surprise, Teslas. Model Y was just under 17,000, whereas Model 3 was just over 14,000 examples. But then hot on the tails, BYD Seal, and then also the Atto 3. So the Seal had just over 5,000 examples sold year to date, and then Atto 3 was just under 5,000. Something I want to talk about though that is going to be interesting moving forward, and James talked on it just before. People have had their Model 3s and Model Ys for a few years now, and their leases might be finishing, might be looking to swap into something else. I know my partner Lockie is considering doing something the same. He has a Model 3. And I've had a little gander on some classified sites, and I was really shocked. So there are currently almost 600 Tesla Model 3s listed for sale on an 600 on an unnamed publication that I won't
a place
say.
that has sales of cars, I assume. Yes.
And then also 136 Tesla Model Ys. So a lot of people are looking to get rid of their Model 3s and Model Ys.
So, but obviously, Model 3 came out in 2019 or something, wasn't it?
Yep.
So obviously, it has a few extra years on the Model Y, but still 600. Yeah. And considering to get in one now is like $58,000 for a new one.
I think it's under 55.
Maybe it's a Model Y that's 58.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, jeez, that's a hard thing to do.
I was looking at the average pricing, and it was not the greatest. I saw lots of 40s, and it's a pretty nice car for 40 grand, but there are heaps on the market. It's just flooded at the moment. So I'm very interested to watch this space in the next couple of months leading to the end of the year.
Well, I know Paul mentioned the other day off air that basically dealers are not willing to touch them anymore. They don't want to take them. They don't want to have them on their lot because they just can't move them. A lot of the, we buy your car online sort of thing, they won't touch them either because they can't move them on. So do you think that the decline here, especially with the Tesla stuff, is that, the consumer confidence is down a little bit because they keep changing their prices, the resale's not great, or do you think it's just all the early adopters have sort of got the cars now and everybody else, the regular buying public, are looking at maybe the more conventional stuff or stuff that comes from the brands that they already know or they already have had a car from in the past?
I think it's probably a combination of both. I definitely feel the changing price has really hurt resale. I think when Lockie bought his Model 3, it was just a little bit under 60 grand. And as we just spoke about before, base Model 3 is like 52, 54, something along those lines. And that's a better car than what he got. So like, it really speaks to volumes, and like, there are lots of these being sold, and eventually they have to be sold at some point. And I suppose he was an early adopter, and there are a lot of other people now looking at EVs because it's a bit more tried and tested, more mainstream in that sense. And I suppose that's where challenges like BYD come in. They've got really sharp, even sharper starting prices. So I'm very interested to see.
And the BYD Seal, which I guess is the closest Model 3 competitor, is far more comfortable to drive around in. But I guess BYD leads us nicely into plug-in hybrid electric vehicles, which is your specialist subject this week, James.
Yes, I have been the FEV evangelist for a while, I guess. But yeah, so FEV sales have been a talking point all year. We've seen a really rapid increase in their sales off a low base, but at the moment we're up 120.5%, which is quite a big number. And so far this year, we've seen 15,546 FEVs registered, which is almost just over 10% of normal hybrids. I think Toyota has been a big part of the 129, nearly 130,000 hybrids that have been sold this year. We're seeing, I think this really correlates with the introduction of FBT exemptions that I think came into effect late last year, early this year. And so from there, we've started seeing a lot of brands bringing in more plug-in hybrid options, but also the existing vehicles getting some, like a pretty big shot in the arm. So Mitsubishi at the moment has 2 cars that are in the top 3 of Australia's favourite FEVs, and each of them account for between 20 and 25% of their respective model line sales. So I'll just go through the top 5 FEVs because I thought this was actually quite interesting, particularly the 4th and 5th options. So number 1 so far this year is the Mitsubishi Outlander, which has registered 4,438 units, and it accounts for 20.9% of Outlander sales. And when we know how big the Outlander has been this year, the new entrant is the BYD Sea-Line 6, which I think only really came online in July and has done 3,207 registrations, and obviously that's only a plug-in hybrid, so it's 100%.
Impressive in like a couple of months, yeah.
Well, it cracked, I think, 1,000 units twice the last 2 months, and I think last month it was 1,100 and something, and it narrowly missed out on a top 20 spot once you included the Teslas, or there was something else that sort of knocked it out. So then from there we've got the Mitsubishi Eclipse Cross, which is registered 1,944 units and makes up for 26.4% of Eclipse Cross sales. That is also one of the cheapest FEVs in the country, so you can see that people wanting an affordable entry into that market are probably getting a really great novated leasing deal on that.
It's also ancient.
It is also ancient, yeah. Now the next 2 are quite interesting, and they're almost anagrams of each other. So the Mazda CX-60 is actually the next most popular FEV in Australia. It's registered 1,193 units and now accounts for 12.2% of CX-60 sales. I know that at the beginning of the CX-60's life in Australia, I think the FEV was a much higher ratio of that, because I think the early adopters were getting in and trying that tech early. And this year, I think once that initial interest sort of died off a little bit, we've seen Mazda introduce some really sharp drive-away deals on the petrol and diesel versions that perhaps have pushed people into the normal ones over like a top spec CX-5 or RAV4, because you get like a 6-cylinder big premium looking SUV. But yeah, that's still quite a lot of CX-60 FEVs, given that car's only doing about 400 or 500 units per month, which is a lot less than the other 3 that we've just spoken about. And then 5th is actually a premium branded vehicle, which is the Volvo XC60. It's done only 624 units in terms of its plug-in hybrids, and they have 2 versions now, but they're both somewhere between $90,000 and $110,000 depending on which one you get. But the plug-in hybrid versions of the XC60 are accounting for 40.6% of all XC60 sales, which is very high. And so we've seen this trend upwards, and it's actually prompted the National Automotive Leasing and Packaging Association, which goes by the acronym NALSPA. So not a nail spa where you get your nails done,
okay.
But NALSPA is calling for an exemption extension I've done that myself, so clearly I should coin that term, but an extension of the FBT brakes for PHEVs, which currently is scheduled to end in April 2025.
Yeah, so why is that ending? Do we know? Is it because it cost the government too much? Is that really why they're ending it?
So I think when the policy first came out, it was meant to run right through 2025 and I think into 2026. I think that was the original bill that was introduced into Parliament. I think the Greens were really vocal in ending the PHEV subsidy earlier to prompt people to get into electric vehicles. Now, the problem with that is that when the government is doing that and the infrastructure hasn't been able to keep up, that's one problem, because then people can't charge them publicly. The other problem is that I think, we didn't really have many PHEV options to begin with. If anything, EVs took off quicker than PHEVs did in Australia, because PHEVs have existed here for a very long time, with the first Mitsubishi Outlander PHEV like 10 years ago. But they were still very niche because, unlike Europe, we never had subsidies and incentives in place. And so having them in the last 12 months, I think it's prompted people to actually look into the tech because, as we can recall in our various discussions about PHEVs in the last few months, there's a perception about them being complex, there's a perception of them being expensive and all this kind of thing. But I think it was really down to what consumers were educated about, because I think as people have sort of found out what they were, you can see here that people are buying them. And the C-Line 6 is a prime example, a brand new product, a new technology type, and people are buying them in droves. And the anecdotal thing, because I've actually spoken to a few people that have gone out and bought one, is like, oh, we love it. We can drive it like an electric vehicle every day. And then if we go out on the weekend or go on a road trip, we don't have to worry about public charging infrastructure. We can just fill it up like a petrol engine. That's always been the concept. And it seems that the naysayers have always been quick to say, oh, well, you're carrying around an empty battery or, some other nonsense like that. You could charge it via a 3-pin socket and it's done overnight, unlike an EV, which might give you like another 10% or 20% depending on what you've got. And I think for Australia, a lot of people who might have range anxiety because they have to travel long distances often, this is a great alternative for them. I think having different pathways for different people to take that electrification journey at their own pace, I think is really important, because if we're talking about letting the consumer or the market decide what should be available here, this is a prime example.
And I think the big thing is, and to all the naysayers out there, I'm talking to you that go, oh, EVs are just a fad. Nearly 25% of sales to date this year are hybrid or EV. I think that says that it's not a fad anymore. It is a legitimate thing. The market is clearly moving in that direction.
Yeah, and we've all been in the industry for a long time now. We'll just go back to 20-something years ago when Toyota brought out the Prius, and everyone was like, oh, tree hugger this, blah blah blah. Everyone panned Toyota for having this hybrid tech for a really long time. It took them a good 10-15 years for it to take off. Now it's this dominant force in our market, and we had the same thing. Everyone's like, it's just a fad. It's just this. It's not powerful enough. It doesn't meet my needs and whatever. And it takes time to develop this tech. And you can see where Toyota's at now, where it dominates pretty much every segment it competes in, especially when it has a hybrid option. And I think PHEV was always going to be the next step. It's just that Australia missed that step when Europe started introducing them. So it'll be really interesting to see if NAILSPA or NAILSPA's calls to action are listened to by the the regulatory people that put these things in place. Whether we see an extension to the FBT brake, and with the C-Line 6 being a true mainstream player that offers this tech at an affordable price beyond just Mitsubishi, that was still fairly niche relative to their other offerings. I'll be really interested to see with some of the new stuff coming into market, like the Shark and the Ranger plug-in hybrid that we saw before, that once people actually start getting into these cars and trying out this technology for themselves, whether that helps it to really take off. Because I think it takes like a Ranger or even a RAV4. People have been asking for a RAV4 Prime for a long time.
Which I have driven, and it is fantastic.
I think once people actually get to feel, once we get to a point where, PHEVs are doing anywhere between 70 and 100 Ks on EV range, I reckon they could be here to stay for a long time. Yeah,
and I reckon that's not very far away. All right, so the big question is, do we expect to see a downward overall trend continue for the rest of the year? I think, is that our predictions coming true, or are we going to see maybe a little surge towards the end? What do you reckon?
I reckon probably downward still. I don't know if I really see a spike happening towards the end of the year.
Jack, the naysayer, James, what do you think?
I think the overall market will be down. I think we're on track to crack a mil, which is not a bad year.
No, absolutely not.
It's a lot of cars. But I think what we're seeing is there are specific segments that are doing well, and there are others that are in decline, and some of the really high volume ones that might be high emitting or high price, they're the ones that are coming down that were for the last couple of years have been driving the market growth, and we might see some more affordable players or various segments that are starting to get back on the up now that people are perhaps being a little bit more judicious with what they buy.
All right, so before we finish or wrap up VFACTS or this episode, anything that really jumped out and surprised you this month?
Yes, actually. In the top 10 was the CX-3, which I really did not expect to see.
That's another ancient car.
Actually, it's relatively old. I haven't driven one in a fair while now. Had over almost 2,000 sales for the month, and it's in 8th place, which is, it's above the CX-5. It's above a lot of cars, and obviously. But it really surprised me, given it must be something that people are still after, something small, relatively affordable, and yeah, they don't really mind.
Must be some good deals out there for it. Anything from you, James?
I think what really stuck out to me is that Ford's now overtaken Mazda year to date, which I think is the first time that Mazda's actually been knocked out of second place for a very, very long time. It's more impressive given what we were talking about before about the fact that the Ranger and Everest are driving Ford's growth, and together are very easily in the 60 to 80 grand bracket for the bulk of their volume. So I'll be really interested to see whether Ford can hold that lead over Mazda going into the end of the year. I know that Mazda has some new launches coming which might skew it a little bit, but the fact that we're seeing this big shake-up might be a real indicator to some of these brands to really revisit their model lineups to see how they can shift them with all these new factors coming into play over the next 12 months.
Well, yes, I expect to see a lot of run-out offers popping up very soon for model year 24 stuff, so it'll be interesting to see the end of the year. All right, it wouldn't be a CarExpert podcast without our picks of the week. Jack, as our special guest this week, what is your pick of the week?
Now, I think we've spoken about hybrids a lot already.
So we just knocked the Prius a little bit, yeah?
Speaking of Prius though, I've found this really, really cool looking Prius on Instagram. Its name is Pistachio and is just a regular Prius, just picture that, but it's lifted 4 or 5 inches and it has 40-inch tires on it. It's like a monster truck, and I think it's the coolest thing that I've seen since that Caddy that I mentioned last week, a few weeks ago, I should say. It's just ridiculous for a Prius. We was talking about it just before we started filming, but I'd love to know if it retains the hybrid powertrain, what the fuel economy's like, because when it's parked next to a Navara or a Hilux, it looks, the utes look small compared to it. I just think it's so cool and so unique. And I give credit to the person that's created that. They're Japanese, and so cool. I'd love to take a look myself.
Trade the Jimny for one?
Oh yeah, maybe. It's a logical step. We've got to save fuel somehow.
Yeah, exactly. James, what's your pick this week?
So over the weekend, Jack actually joined me, as did the rest of the marketplace team. Josh and Max came with us as well. We just had the Drive Against Depression Spring Drive Day in Melbourne. So we drove from Shannon's showroom in Heatherton, where instead of having their usual display on there, all of us got to park our cars up almost like a showroom or like a car meet, which was really cool. And then we took a scenic route down to Arthur's Seat on the Mornington Peninsula, and it was a really great day. It was the final Melbourne event for the year. So it was great to bring people together and talk about mental health and that kind of thing in that setting. It was really good, and there's also another event I think in Adelaide before the end of the year. But all of us, various members of the team, have been involved with the charity one way or another over the years, and as a charity ambassador, it's been a great opportunity for me to be part of something that is so powerful and growing, and have a conversation about things that tie in, for me personally and a lot of other people involved, tie in a love of cars and driving with some more important and heavy hitting stuff where, a lot of people are touched by mental health struggles one way or another. And to be able to talk about it in a safe space and create an open conversation between people that you don't even know about things that might be bothering you or troubling you at any given time, I think is really important, and something that I'm really keen to continue being a part of moving forward. So
if you do live in Adelaide and you want to get involved, what's the best way to do that?
We'll post a link to the registration link for the event at driveagainstdepression.com.au, and it's also got a full calendar that is regularly updated with all our upcoming events. Currently there's things being done across Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne and Adelaide. So chances are there's probably something near you at some point in the near future. And you can also donate via links, and there's plenty of other things there that you can look into. So yeah, we'll post a link in the description.
Very cool. Well, mine is Bathurst 1000 is on this weekend. I'm very excited. I'm going, and I will take some photos of the Toyota Supra V8 car. They're going to have a full-size clay model there.
Oh, cool.
But yeah, just in
Hope
general.
it doesn't melt.
I don't think it's going to be that hot, but hopefully they'll put it undercover. But yes, Bathurst 1000 is on this weekend. It is an actual live free event on Channel 7 for once. It's not just on Foxtel. So if you are a car enthusiast, it's worth tuning in probably around 4 p.m. just to watch the last sort of 20 odd laps and things get a little bit crazy. Hopefully get some rain and some kangaroos and some echidnas out again. But that is my pick for this week. I'll be very tired when I'm back on the podcast next Monday because I'm flying back in on Monday morning. But yeah, other than that, it has been a big week with a lot of numbers. So Jack, thank you for coming along and helping us get through it all.
Thank you.
And James, thank you. I mean, this is your job and it's part of your weekly ritual to do the CarExpert podcast, but it was still a lot of numbers. So thanks for sitting through it all.
And numbers are not my friends. So thank you so much for having me and allowing me to get through it with you.
That's all right. Well, thank you all of you for watching. We hope this hasn't hurt your head too much. I will put links in the description that you can go and read all this, wrap your head around the numbers a little bit more. And if you have any thoughts, feedback, you think we should have more, less, anything we should look at instead, leave a comment and let us know. But until next time, have a good one.